Please welcome the Atlantic's Chief Growth Officer, Mega Garibaldi.
Everyone, I'm Mega Garibaldi, Chief Growth Officer at The Atlantic. We're so delighted that you could join us here today for this important conversation about small businesses and scaling sustainably. Small businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy, creating two-thirds of new jobs and about half of all economic activity. Although new business creation has seen a historic boom in the past decade, unfortunately, nearly half of new small businesses fail within their first 5 years. Today, we'll explore the infrastructure required to get small businesses off the ground, hear from entrepreneurs who are scaling successfully, and learn about how giving back to the community can establish roots that lead to long-term success. I would like to thank our underwriters, Goldman Sachs, for this session. Please do silence your cell phones, but keep them handy. We encourage you to share your experience on all your social platforms using the hashtag TAF23, and please enjoy the session.
For a conversation on infrastructure by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, please welcome Omi Bell, founder and CEO of Black Girl Ventures. Emmy Reyes, CEO of the Latino Economic Development Center. And Amir Karigot, co-founder and CEO of Agency. Here to lead the conversation is Atlantic staff writer Annie Lowry.
Put that up there. I'd like to thank everybody, and especially our panelists, for being here today. I really appreciate it. And we are going to talk about infrastructure and infrastructure for small businesses. But I feel like I would be remiss to not start by contextualizing us within this really unusual moment, probably for all companies, but especially small companies that are more reliant on external financing in some cases, which is that we had the extraordinary acute phase of the COVID pandemic, which is still with us in a lot of ways, but this moment where everything shuts down and there's kind of this extraordinary flowering of new businesses, and maybe that moment of stress and anxiety in some strange and somewhat unexpected way leads to thousands of new companies being started, more than would have been predicted otherwise. And then the second thing is that we're in this environment of very, very high inflation and really high interest rates, which I am sure is impacting all three of you and the folks that you work with in some way. So I kind of want to start with that sort of broader environment. So Omi, let's talk about access to capital and how much that feels like the primary obstacle for small businesses at the moment. Is that what you're finding, or are there other things that we should be looking at as opposed to just the interest rate that people are getting on their loans?
Yeah, I mean, you can never take your eyes off of access to capital, right? Yeah. I think it's always something that entrepreneurs need. Well, first, thank you to the Atlantic for having me. Thank you, Annie. And so entrepreneurs face three main challenges: access to ability to hire, access to capital, but then access to influential networks. And so for Black and brown founders, that is a huge, huge hurdle. We talk a lot about money itself, but we really should be talking about those influential networks. Yeah. Somehow, even in a downturn, the people who are in the most wealthiest position kind of stay there, and can fare until things shift. And then there's an entire pool of people who can't fare until things shift. And so thinking about how we get people access to those influential networks is hugely important.
And so, Emmy, I want to pick up on that thread a little bit, which I think it's a really good point, that it's actually really another really big shift is that just competition for jobs is really high right now. We've had a pretty extended period in which the unemployment rate has been low. And I think always that can cover up some difficulties in the labor market and issues that people have had. But this is after, in the Obama years, certainly, there were just a lot of people around and it was a little bit easier to hire. So how is that influencing what you're seeing along with this other kind of unusual interest rate environment?
Yeah, I think small businesses, well, since we're in D.C., I'll focus on the DMV area here, but so many of the small business owners here have had to adapt. They're working more with government agency and their workforce development support systems, and they're trying, I think one of the biggest obstacles is not having enough capital to be able to sustain a new workforce. There's different policies that exist to allow entrepreneurs to go after larger procurement opportunities than they ever have before. Right now, when we see the development that we're sitting in currently, a lot of entrepreneurs of color are finally able to have sort of access to these opportunities, but they don't have the capital necessary to cover the cost of taking on larger projects, right? They get paid for these project months on sort of later on in the process, and so really the struggle of the access to capital, which currently right now with the interest rates that we were talking about earlier, they can't access traditional funding methods, right? They're not getting the loans that they need. Banks are tightening their ability to be able to provide that capital, and so CDFIs like LEDC are trying to step into that, but they're also struggling to get access to the capital that they then send to the entrepreneurs in our area.
Mm-hmm. So, Amir, I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and, working with businesses that interact in that. Is this something that's been able to avoid these cyclical trends, or are you seeing the same things? Because it feels like there's a need for companies to remain cyber secure that might exist outside of these other trends that are happening. But I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
I do think that cybersecurity has had a little bit of, an insulation from the rest of the market. Not quite as hot as say AI, but the demand is growing. I think that cybersecurity has completely changed from something that companies had to just check off a box to something that they have to lead with if they're trying to earn business and trust with other companies. So because of that, I think it's still growing, and it's a competitive field, though.
Mm-hmm. I hope all of us personally are working on our own pivots to AI, think about reframing whatever we're doing as an AI-related business at the moment. So I want to talk, step back for a minute and talk to all of you about your entrepreneurial backgrounds, because my understanding is that all of you have sort of a certain intimate familiarity with the obstacles that small businesses are facing. So Omi, perhaps we could start with you. And I recognize that that's a broad question, but I'm interested from hearing all three of you, a little of the deep history here.
Yeah, I was never a great employee.
You should be a journalist.
I did a little stint in journalism. I think it's I was always a person that wanted to change things or fix things that nobody else wanted to fix. I'm always the one that raises my hand and say, oh yeah, remember we said we was going to fix that thing? Are we still doing that? And they're yeah, the budget's gone for that. And so I just found myself, I'm big, career switching. I was a K-12 educator. I worked in workforce development. I worked at the Patent and Trademark Office. I'm a computer scientist in training. I called myself a private eye at one point. That's a different story for a different day. I was just figuring it out and trying to figure out where I fit.
Yeah.
After getting laid off twice, I was devastated, decided oh my God, what is wrong with y'all? I'm smart. Why are you laying me off? I went home and I called California Psychics, because that's the only thing that a person can possibly do when you've been laid off twice, is try to find a higher power. So from there, I went on another stint of just trying things. I built a tent in my living room, rented it out on Airbnb. I started a t-shirt line. The first one bombed. Nobody liked it. The second one I started was called Made by a Black Woman, so I launched that in a print shop. My mom gave me $10,000 of her retirement to start my first company, to start this particular company, the print shop. I used my tax returns to buy my own machines. So when you talk about access to capital for marginalized communities, women, underrepresented founders, they're dealing with having to use earned capital, not having a lot of family legacy or a lot of wealth generation from generation to generation. You just figure it out from retirement, from money that you're earning from your paycheck, and just working through that. So that's what I did, and that's what I thought I was going to be doing with my life, a print shop and doing a t-shirt company, until in 2016, the news came out that Black women were starting businesses at 6 times the national average, yet receiving less than 1% of venture capital. And this was before the pandemic. Yeah. So, all those businesses that bloomed during the pandemic are now a part of how we serve. So I launched Black Girl Ventures in a house in Southeast DC. 30 people showed up, 4 women pitched. We voted with marbles and coffee mugs. If you like that person's pitch, you put a marble in their coffee mug. Fast forward to today, We have funded over 450 women-owned companies who have efforts across about 15 cities. We no longer vote with marbles and coffee mugs. I have proprietary software that I built out to handle the voting and the donating.
I love that you built your own infrastructure. This is great.
Thank you.
Emmy, I'm going to go to you next. Let's get like a little bit of the deep infrastructure about how you, or the deep story of how you ended up doing what you did.
So I was the daughter of an entrepreneur, and so I knew I didn't want to be one.
Yeah.
But my parents operated restaurants here in DC and Virginia growing up, and so after college, I became an intern at a CDFI, the Latino Economic Development Center, that really works with entrepreneurs in the DMV area and helping them get their dreams. For me, it was a lot of seeing the system fail my father throughout his journey as an entrepreneur. When he had to shut down his restaurant, I think that was really eye-opening for me in terms of he was someone that lacked any education. He didn't go past first grade and was able to open 3 restaurants in the DC area. And that was a lot of supporting each other, right? The Black and brown community are always out there and show up for each other. But there wasn't a lot of support for people who weren't able to access applications online or apply for things in English, or didn't even know what opportunities existed for them. And so for me, it was about joining an organization that committed very deeply to being able to make more programs and more capital accessible in the language that people needed, through the mediums that they need that, whether that be in person or online. In the last 3 years, one of our main goals has been able to work with local government partners primarily to make more applications for grants and loans in whatever language that people need, and much more accessible. I think we got used to asking 100 questions that nobody needed the answers to make a decision if somebody was worthy of capital or investment, and we've been able to simplify that, make that much sooner, or easier for them to apply, as well as offer sort of live chat support in multiple languages so that people have that support when they're working on these applications and through that. And for me, it's really currently about a block away from here is the Colada shop. I recommend that everybody go there. But when I first met her as an intern 5 years ago, I was deeply committed to being able to find a way to get her to sort of become the primary owner. And her journey was that she had to get a bunch of investors to open up the cafe that she really managed and dreamed up. And now, during the pandemic, all the investors backed out. And since then, she's opened an additional 5 locations. And that's very much because we gave her the tools that she needed to be able to do that. She had that willpower, that determination, but was able to take advantage of the various grants and programs that exist for entrepreneurs in our area.
Okay. Wonderful. Amir, it's your turn in the hotspot here. Let's talk a little bit about the background of how you ended up doing what you do.
I've had a really long background in entrepreneurship, and it's had a lot of ups and downs. I started my first company right out of college, went straight into deciding that I wanted to work in a regulated industry that I had no experience in, and we 3 college friends started a trading platform, and we created our own programming language to actually build the trading strategies in. And we did everything wrong. We made every mistake possible. We had we went pretty far with it. We kept running the company for about 5 years. We were able to raise money, but I made every single mistake a founder could make. We sold that company, and then I decided I never wanted to actually do that again, and then that was a really miserable experience. But as time went on, I couldn't not be a founder again. So I went back, and I'm actually on my 3rd company. I've done a bunch of different accelerators. I did Y Combinator. I did the Harvard Innovation Lab with this company. And I've always been around the kind of startup ecosystem. Back over 10 years ago, there really weren't institutional seed funding available. That didn't exist. When I started my first company, there was only angel investors. Literally you had to find people, and I knew nobody. I'm, children of immigrants, we had no money. I couldn't ask my uncle for a check or whatever, but it was you had to go find people to raise money from. And then today there's people who raise money from other people to give people with no product yet, money to start a company. So it's definitely gotten easier than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the terminology and maybe the mindset that comes with the terminology of thinking of a small business owner or somebody who's starting up their own thing, thinking of something as seed funding or venture capital, or thinking of themselves as an entrepreneur. Because it feels like that comes with perhaps a set of tools, expectations, ways that you might present your business outwardly. But maybe for some people that also makes it seem intimidating, like it's something that, perhaps is not for them. And so I'm wondering if we could share some thoughts about those words, since we've talked so much about culturally specific and reaching out and meeting people where they are and seeing them as generators of ideas and businesses and good for their community. So Emmy, perhaps could we talk about that a little bit, since you mentioned, the importance again of seeing people where they are, right?
Yeah, I think one of the incredible things that's happening is that we're seeing more Black and brown on venture capital investment from people that own those investment firms, right? Mm-hmm. And so they are, I think, prioritizing investing in ways that has never been done before. I think another benefit that's happening right now is that there are local governments. I think DC is about to launch one where they're starting to create their own venture capital firms that have more of a sort of community impact mindset that's very different than we've had before. And I think you can probably speak to that much more so. I
mean, it's interesting when you talk about the naming of things. Small business is a government term.
Yep.
Right? I don't know that many of our founders call themselves that, and we call ourselves what we need to call ourselves in the moment that we need to be called it. So if it is, if it is entrepreneur works for the bank, then we're entrepreneur. If it is founder works for the venture capitalist, then we a founder. If it is small business owner works for the government, then we are a small business owner. I mean, it's so interesting because even the definition of small business from a government perspective actually would be considered big business for some. It's certain,
you can have 499 employees.
Yeah,
that doesn't feel so small to me. Yeah.
So I think that from what I'm seeing, the finance industry in itself is not prepared to handle this bubble that happened during the pandemic.
Yep.
There's a huge need for microfinance.
Yep.
And so the finance industry is now going to have to shift and figure out how it segments itself in ways that we've never had to do before.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Amir, do you have thoughts on this specific topic that you want to share?
I think that there's a lot of, these words mean so many different things to people. I think I've seen it on the other side too. I recently read a book that was calling, certain types of businesses startups that maybe some people wouldn't call startups or, all that sort of thing. But these words don't really matter. I mean, it's just, the intention is what's important. If the person who's owning the business, their intention is to take it to a certain place, to grow at a certain speed, or to accomplish a certain thing, that's what's important. And the thing that I always tell people is that the reason businesses fail isn't because they run out of money; it's because the founders give up. So again, the intention is really what's important.
I appreciate that. And so, we wanted to include some advice for small business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever term it is that applies to these people that are generating new ideas and products and pushing them out into our economy. So regarding access to capital and then also regarding technology. So, I guess that probably the advice would be specific to the person sitting in front of you, but since we have a general audience here, I wonder if you can talk me through what you think the advice is given each of your unique life experiences and the work that you do here. Maybe we'll start with Amir. If you imagine that we have some entrepreneurs here that are seeking your help.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell them to, some of the best investors in the world analyze businesses not by deciding what business will work or, what if they think it's a good idea, but by actually reducing the number of scenarios where a business could fail. And that's usually, do you have a good team? Is it more than one founder? Have you launched the product? How quickly can you launch the product? Are the people you have already on board enough to build the product and sustain it and all of that? So it's launch your product, launch it again and again until you're successful, stay focused. That's the advice I think that most people need to hear, is that a lot of the companies you hear that are super successful and famous founders, They all have their ups and downs. It's not a straight line. You have to keep, persevering and launching and, not give up.
Emmy, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing is that when the private sector steps back, the nonprofit sector steps up to the plate and the need. I think that no matter what happens in the economy in the next couple of months, CDFIs will be stepping up their investments, and we have to, right? Our interest rates aren't going to go as high as banks or anything like that. They have to continue to invest in CDFIs, and so we continue to operate. I think no matter what stage of the process people are, there are a lot of resources. No matter what state people are in, there are CDFIs that are out there to support them. I think CDFI investment, the loans that they're able to provide or the grants that they're able to provide are very essential for entrepreneurs that don't have another option. I think one of our biggest successes, of course, Sweet Green. We helped them when they started out here in DC and just had one location, helped them with their second location, and now they've gone public and they're national and they've grown out that much. And that was our role there was before they could get capital or venture capital to invest in their idea and their product. And so really it's never sort of giving up to the idea that the founders have to continue. There's always opportunities no matter what is happening at the federal level or in the private sector.
Two things. I would say, one, stop focusing on what you don't know and double down on everything you do know. And I mean, that's life advice for people, but also for small business owners, you're spinning your wheels on solving a million problems and trying to figure out where to go. And so I don't know this. I don't know how to go there. I don't know how I'm going to hire. I don't know enough people. I don't know. What do you know? You know you don't want to be doing certain tasks. You know you don't, you want to be in business a certain way. You know you want to sell or you don't want to sell, right? That causes you to position in a different way. You know you want to have loan debt. You know you don't want to have loan debt. You know you want to go ask family and friends. You know you don't. I think start with what you do know. And just hammer all of that out and then set it aside, write it all out, set it aside for 3 days, then go back and look at it. And I guarantee you, if you write down everything you do know, the answer to what you don't know is somehow there. The second thing is revenue is the validator. Nonprofit doesn't mean non-revenue. So even if you have a nonprofit, you're in business for a different cause, but you still have to have revenue. So either way, as a business owner, your sister's, cousin's, aunt's, brother who owned a ice cream shop one day is not the validator. The investor is not the validator. The banks are not the validator. Revenue and your ability to leverage what you have to generate capital and impact is your validator. And keep that center, and you'll be strategic in how you make decisions.
Okay. We have just a very brief period of time here for one final question. And so one thing I think that all three of you have brought up is how much of a reality failure is if you're doing what you're doing, how common it is for entrepreneurs to fail, for companies to fail, and maybe, and this is reading between the lines a little bit, but like how important that is, and that's just a sort of reality of being in a place where you're creating something new. And so I'm wondering if you have like a little bit of advice for people who are failing, or thoughts about failure that you would want to share, since it seems like it's such an important part of innovation here. It's one of those unfortunate parts of life. I think everybody has seen it or at least experienced it in some way. Now, as an investor myself, I see first-time founders go through it, and it kind of doesn't matter how old you are when you're doing it. If it's your first company, you kind of make the same mistakes, and you can give somebody the answers and they still have to just, experience it on their own. I would say the one thing that's important to know is that I think there's a statistic that on average, most startups fail or something like that, but the average founder of multiple startups is successful in the long run. So if you keep doing it, you will eventually make it work. Okay, Emmy, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, I completely agree. I think the fear of failure, sometimes it prolongs a process or a decision that really needs to be made. And it's reaching out and looking at that network, talking to other entrepreneurs. I think most entrepreneurs want to talk to other entrepreneurs and talk to them about their successes and failures and ideas. It's not a decision that needs to be arrived at alone.
I mean, failure is such a mechanical term. It's almost a glass half full versus half empty kind of conversation. Just because, I mean, take a company like Snapchat, who wasn't really making a lot of revenue, but they got millions of users. Are they failing or not, right? I think where they can see, they may be failing at revenue, but they have the opportunity to generate it. So I think, being clear that risk mitigation doesn't mean you don't take any risk. It means you are very clear and specific and strategic about the risk you're going to take and why. And then what you're going to do if something falls, if the bottom falls out, right? So I think I don't like to talk about failure in that way just because it's like, it's such a mechanical term, right? If your engine stops working, it is engine failure, right? You're not bouncing back from an engine. The engine's gone. But if your business is failing, you can bounce back and you can let go. And I think I'd rather talk about it from the standpoint of when to let go versus failing.
Okay, I love that. I feel so grateful to have had this conversation, and I so regret that we couldn't sit here and talk for many hours more. But thank you so much to Amir, to Emmy, and to Omi, and to all of you. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it.
And now, a conversation produced by our underwriter, Goldman Sachs, on the power of rural small business.
Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses has been helping entrepreneurs grow for over a decade. Cultivating deep roots in communities across the country through business education and access to capital for entrepreneurs passionate about growth. Today, 1 in every 5 Americans, more than 60 million people across the country, live in rural communities. And small businesses across rural areas provide 65% of all jobs, making them an essential bedrock of the local and national economy. But rural small businesses face unique challenges. Challenges finding workers, challenges acquiring capital for growth, challenges accessing the resources they need. To meet these needs, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses is expanding, bringing our best-in-class training program and capital partnerships to rural states across America.
My name is Beth Modlin. We are in Bismarck, North Dakota, and the name of my company is Juniper. Before the 10,000 Small Businesses program, we took on a lot of small, disconnected projects. After the program, we were able to take on multi-year, multi-state programs and grow exponentially.
My name is Carl Clementson. I'm from Minot, North Dakota. Upon joining 10,000 Small Businesses, we had a plateau of revenue, and after this year, we'll have doubled that revenue line. Next year, we're set to triple that.
Goldman Sachs is committed to supporting the community of small business owners leading innovation in rural America. Together, let's make small big.
Joining us on stage, Asai Pompey, Global Head of Corporate Engagement at Goldman Sachs. Here to lead the conversation is the Atlantic's Chief Revenue Officer and Publisher, Alice McGowan.
All right, Asahi, so wonderful to have you here today. I'm really excited about this conversation, about this whole session. So let's just start off. Can you tell us a little bit about why and how Goldman is committing to small business?
Sure. Alice, first of all, it's fantastic to be with you and the amazing thought leaders every year at the Atlantic Festival. So it's fantastic to be here. I've got to shout out some graduates, our 10,000 Small Businesses program who's here with us today. They are, Alice, why we do what we do. So for the last 14 years, Goldman Sachs has invested deeply into small businesses. So we have had now over 14,000 small businesses graduate from our 10,000 Small Businesses program. What is it? It provides best-in-class education to small business owners across the country free of charge. Also has a capital component, because we know that in order for businesses to grow, you need money, you need capital to grow. So that capital commitment from CDFIs, and then the network, this web of small business owners who are connected with each other, who, something that we didn't expect when we launched the program, they do business with each other. So 86% of graduates do business with each other. And so last month, we announced, actually earlier this month, we announced something fantastic, which is a $100 million commitment to rural small business owners.
Incredible. So what role do corporations play in fostering a robust small business ecosystem around the country?
You know, big business has a significant connection with small businesses. Small businesses can often be the canary in the mine. They're the ones who feel that inflation first, who feel the workforce challenges first, who really, the challenges of childcare can be exacerbated. And so there's a lot that small businesses really teach big business in terms of how to operate. And what we've learned over the last 14 years of our collaboration is that working with small businesses, we're able to really catalyze growth and job creation in the United States economy. And so that's the role, I think, of the private sector.
That's incredible. All right, so let's drop some data quickly here. So we have, according to data from the Small Business Administration, small businesses operate nearly 85% of establishments and employ 54% of workers in rural communities. So what makes small businesses essential to rural communities in particular?
Sure. So small businesses are the backbone of communities generally, urban, suburban, wherever, period. Small businesses are the backbones of those communities. But as we think about rural communities, we have to sort of define, I think, Alice, what we mean by rural, right? So we're talking about from Maine to Minnesota, we're talking about Mississippi, North Dakota, but we're also talking about upstate New York, parts of Pennsylvania, parts of Georgia. So the through line is that rural is really everywhere. So as we think about what are the challenges that rural small business owners face, the low density really exacerbates the issues that they face. What about access to high-speed internet? How are you going to get to that childcare facility before you have to get to your job? So all of those have an impact on whether a small business in a rural community can survive. And that's the reason we've made this $100 million commitment.
It's incredible. So thinking about those and talking about this, a little bit of those problems. So what are the most common problems you're hearing from these small businesses? And what resources do these small businesses have at their disposal currently?
Sure. So most common problems, four in particular. One, access to capital, right? Let me share this with you. A year ago, when we surveyed our small business owners, we said, how confident do you feel in your ability to access capital? 77% of them said, I feel pretty confident in my ability to access capital. Well, March of this year it happened, and now it's 180 degrees. 77% are not confident in their ability to access capital. Yeah. And when you think about that, how does it impact that new product line, that new employee, that software system that you wanted to buy if you don't feel that you can access capital? Second issue, workforce, right? Upwards of over 77% of small businesses say, I cannot find qualified individuals for my open positions. So again, they're delayed in terms of their job growth if they can't find qualified employees. Yeah. The third thing we're seeing is childcare, as I mentioned previously, and also healthcare costs and being able to provide those benefits to their employees.
Yeah, incredible. So thinking about that, rural small businesses come with a diversified set of needs, like accessing local financial institutions and finding workers in their communities. Right. What's one resource that they need more of?
Okay, tough question because they're not a monolith, and they need resources across the board. If I had to do it, I would put it all under the tent of access. Access to capital, access to employees, access to resources. The employee one, Alice, I would say perhaps I would put higher on the list because there's a real differentiator in terms of rural communities having an even greater time really convincing people to stay in those communities, right? Urban communities tend to have more opportunities. It's easier to get young people to stay. I was just in Bismarck, North Dakota, and I was talking with small business owners who are saying, look, our young people are leaving. We've got amazing small businesses here. We want them to stay and to be attracted here. 68% of small business owners that we surveyed say, I'm having a tough time keeping talent and finding talent here locally.
Yeah. What are people doing to keep the youth from leaving?
Sure. So I was in Fargo, North Dakota. There's an amazing tech scene. If you didn't know that, North Dakota has an amazing tech scene. So what we're seeing is small business owners are really developing businesses in their community that they think will attract young people to stay in the community, one. Two is having a certain amount of flexibility in, your offerings. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you have some hybrid offerings that perhaps would be most helpful. Again, it goes back to the benefits. Are you able to provide those healthcare benefits? Are you able to provide those childcare benefits to make it easier for people to stay in the community?
Yeah. So I'm thinking too about, we talked a little bit about urban small businesses and rural small businesses. There's got to be some common thread. So is there, and like, what's the common thread of the problems they face or resources they need?
Sure. I think the common issues that tend to be the same. So I think in terms of access to capital, healthcare, workforce, here's what I say, and I'll tell you a specific example. There's a business owner. Her name is Pam Birch. She's in Hettinger, North Dakota. She started her business as a coffee shop. That coffee shop has become a birthday venue. The birthday venue has become an all-day cafe and community space. So what we're seeing is that in rural communities in particular, small businesses show up in a big way and really are nimble in morphing the model to meet the needs of the community. We also see that with small business owners in urban centers as well, but it happens a bit more in rural communities.
Yeah. So last question, we only have time for one more, but want to ask a little bit about the communities and towns where these businesses operate. And I know Goldman published some research recently saying that the vast majority of rural small business owners think there's not enough affordable, this is back to the social factors, not enough affordable childcare nor affordable housing in their area. How can those social factors impact business growth?
Sure. So those social factors have a direct impact on the bottom line. I'll tease out how. You're waking up in the morning, you have to travel an hour to get to drop your child off at the healthcare facility. After that, you've got to travel another hour to get to your job. And then after school, your child may have after school activities, so you may have to leave the job early. So imagine all that zigzagging across lots and lots of miles. Now, your business owner wants you, they think you're a fantastic talent, but their shop has to open for certain hours. And so we see a direct correlation between healthcare and childcare and what's happening with the small business ecosystem.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's it. Thank you so much,
Thank
Sahi.
you.
Thank you, Goldman Sachs. Thank you. You all, thrilled to be here. So
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it.
And now, to discuss small business big impact, please welcome to the stage Selena Gill, co-founder and CEO of Frere Bonchot Retail Enterprises. Ramunda Lark-Young, owner and co-founder of Mahogany Books. Rach Pike, co-founder of As You Are Bar. Here to lead the conversation is Atlantic staff writer Jerusalem Demsis.
All right, hello everybody. So we have the co-owners and founders of 3 major DC small businesses, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. But the first thing I wanted to start with, I want to start with you, Selena, because family businesses are as tale as old as time. But you've taken another spin on this. You have 3 sons who were 8, 11, and 13 when you began.
12, 9, and 7.
12, 9, and 7 when you began your business. Tell us about managing that. I know you homeschooled them with their taking the lead on starting that.
Managing that has been fun. It's challenging at times. The business was their idea. They wanted more money for Nerf guns and PS4 games. And I told them, it was for PS5.
Yes.
To get a job or start a business that they had enough allowance. And they said, Mom, let's start a business. And I thought they wanted to mow lawns or take trash out for neighbors. They're like, no, Mom, we're going to sell something. So I was homeschooling at the time. And I said, well, if you want to sell something, let's make sure that it can make a profit. So I made them do a research paper about kid businesses and which were most profitable. That was soaps, bath bombs, and candles. We did a chemistry experiment, learned how to make them all. And we stuck with candles because they took them to baseball games, football games, soccer games, and we literally sold things out of the back of the minivan. People bought the candles the most. Then they got a customer list, and we had demand. No website. I mean, it was completely guerrilla selling. It was groundwork. But from there, we moved on to, I think we did a shop made in DC, like a Black History Month pop-up, and they've been selling ever since.
Wow. And how old are they now?
18, 15, and be 13 tomorrow.
Wow. So Raymonda, there's something interesting about your business. You have a bookstore east of the river in Anacostia, and as you told me before, there hasn't been a bookstore since the early 1990s in that part of the city. And for those who don't know, that part of DC is majority black. It's been largely disinvested in both from public and private investment for a really long time. And, one of the challenges, as I'm sure you're aware of, is that bringing private investment often can bring fears of gentrification. How have you kind of managed the need to invest in that community while making sure that people there still feel like it's theirs?
You know what, I think it's important no matter where you are, whether it's a neighborhood that looks like it may be gentrified or not, it's how do you connect with the community? How do you host events that really speak to them? Not really speak to you, but speak to them. So for us, it's hosting poetry workshops or information about financial literacy. So how do we connect with them? How do we meet them where they are? And when you do something like that, it endears them to you. Mm-hmm. But just really being accessible when little kids come into our store, talking to them about books, allowing them to see themselves on books, and that really endears them too. And not feels like, we need to ostracize them or push them away, but really engage them, really kind of get to their level. But I think that should happen anywhere, right? Any store. How do you speak to them and honor them for who they are? Mm-hmm. And that's through our classes and the programming that we do all the time. So, yeah.
And Mahogany Books is focused on Black written literature and from the African diaspora. Tell us about that focus and how that's affected your community.
Absolutely. Unapologetically Black books, right? Mm-hmm. All day, every day. So we focus on books that are written for, by, and about people of the African diaspora. And I worked in big box bookstores for many years, and I always saw like a little section of Black books. And it made me feel like my little section of history didn't matter, but I have an expansive amount of history. So when my husband and I opened up Mahogany Books, shout out to my husband sitting out here. When we opened up Mahogany Books, we knew that there had to be a space for Black books. Our history, there's all this talk about banned books now, but which I feel like, I don't want to say it's a fad, but I felt like Black history books have been banned for a long time. Our history never wants to be told. People are nervous to talk about slavery, civil rights, and things of that nature, but it needs to be. It's not just Black history, it's American history, right? And so to open up Mahogany Books, we wanted that voice to be heard. And I think the other thing I wanted to add to it, I didn't want it to leave it up to somebody else, right? I don't want to leave my Black books up to somebody else to say that they are important enough to be on their shelves. And so for us to open it up, we kind of took that into our own hands. And books that I wanted my child to read, I wanted my neighbors to read, we put on our shelves. And some of them are not the hip books. Some of them are just tried and true books that everybody should read, right? It creates empathy when you learn about somebody else's experience and not just being in your own little bubble. And that was important to us, to make Black books accessible so I can learn from you so you can learn from me. So that's what we do all day, every day. The last thing, I said last thing already, but the next last thing.
Say it as many times.
I get to talk and I get hyped up. But I think the other thing is in the beginning, I would see people come in our store and they would kind of stand at the threshold. And they were not Black people, white people. They would stand there and like, I don't know if this is for me. And I'm like, come in. Just because they're Black books, come and read. I had to read about everybody else. And I get it. But it's just, yes, but it just, again, creates a relationship and a dialogue so you can learn about my experiences. And I say I'm not trying to speak for every Black person in America, but I say as a Black woman here, right? It's important for us to learn about each other, all of us. So our books do that. I can get to talking and get excited, so I'm going to let the mic go on. But yes, that's why we created it.
Thank you. Yes. One of the difficulties of starting a small business in any community, but in DC in particular, there are a lot of roadblocks towards integrating yourself into the existing community. And Rach, when you were starting as You Are Bar, you had to really learn about, the community you were entering into, and also deal with a lot of processes that are created to kind of block new people from marginalized groups and different backgrounds, people who don't have a lot of capital. Can you tell us about that experience?
It was a long road. The ANCs in DC are your neighborhood councils, and we love resident voice. The unfortunate part is often the times the people that are attending these meetings are, we all know money buys time, so they're moneyed people that have a lot of time. They're often older and white. We are established in Capitol Hill, which is a gentrified area that is heavily older and white, especially right on our corner. at 8th Street. So we had a lot of NIMBY attitude. They love the idea. They're very blue voters, but not in my neighborhood. Like, do that. Shouldn't you do that on U Street? Which is exactly the opposite of what we were trying to accomplish, because when we talked to our realtor, we said we want to be in Northeast or Southeast. She was not happy with us, but she worked with us and figured it out. And the reason for that is our more affordable housing is in the Northeast and Southeast side of the city, and that is where we and the people we're providing service for live. We're a queer bar that prioritizes the most marginalized of the already marginalized queer community. So we know we're the paid less on the dollar, struggle for job security. And we really wanted a safe space for people like us and like that. And so, yeah, they made it really hard. They tried to protest our liquor license, which was never going to fly. The alcohol board was definitely going to give us one. This establishment's always had one. But they are smart and moneyed and, again, have time. So they were trying to prolong it. And what that does is it pushes your capital to the edge. And then you back out because you don't have enough to open the doors because you're paying rent on a building you can't get revenue into. We are lucky, and I love the queer community. I love marginalized people. We show up for each other. And Joe and I, my wife, she's the co-founder with me, we knew we couldn't do it on our own. It couldn't be the two of us against these 30 residents. So we did a call to action, had a community meeting, and the very next ANC meeting, we had 120 participants on the call. We crashed the facilitator's computer, and our voices were heard. And at that point, and the truth of the voices of the 30 that were there came to light. And some pretty horrible things were said. We wish you'd just go back to the neighborhoods you came from. We prefer the rats at Popeyes over As You Are. It goes too far, which I don't even know what that means, but sure. So it was clear. Many people have asked in articles, like, was it homophobic? And I was like, look, I can't say it was, but it sure seemed like it. Like, I don't know. But we made it, and we're there, and the community showed up, and it really, to echo what you were saying about when you invest in the community and you invite them in, they feel like it's theirs. Absolutely. They have a voice in it. And we've worked in queer spaces a combined almost 30 years. And we've worked for mostly gay, white male owners. And it was about them. And we really we would not own a bar to sell booze or coffee. We own a cafe bar. It has coffee. It's delicious. We own a space to create space for the community, and we know we don't represent the majority of the community. Like, I'm a non-binary white human, my wife is a queer woman, and we know that doesn't represent everybody, so we just invited the community, like, we don't program anything in our building. The community comes in and says, we want to do this drag show, and we're like, great, let's do it. We have all the equipment, because we're not the experts on that. That's their expertise, and we just hold the space and pay the bill and sign on the dotted line so it can exist and stay, and people can see themselves in the space, on the stage. Karaoke's a blast. There's so many good things that are happening in there, and we're committed to prioritizing the most marginalized of the marginalized. And our stance is, if the most marginalized communities are safe, then everybody else by proxy is safe, right? So that's our mission, and safety is the priority. So the neighbors loved that idea. They just didn't want it in their backyards, but we're there. So that's what it is.
And Selena, your boys were very adamant that money went back to the community as well, that giving, almost $40,000 or more than $40,000 raised for homelessness since 2017. And I wanted to ask you, increasingly, especially as the housing crisis has gotten really bad, we're seeing large rates of homelessness happening all over our communities. What role do you think small businesses should play in addressing that crisis and helping people who are unhoused?
I think that just like I heard on the panel already, you need to be involved in your community. We've been so successful because the community has really come out for us. When we used to vend in, 14-degree weather, and we vended in 101-degree weather, they said, "Oh, where are you going to be? We'll be there with you." They've supported us in every single way, and I feel like, especially when you come from a community where I'm from Virginia, from Hampton, Virginia, Hampton, Newport News. And I'm so used to your neighbor, knowing your neighbors. And if you need food, your neighbor can feed you. If you need a ride, you can ask the neighbor. I hitchhiked, growing up. I wouldn't do it here, but, but it was that type of community. And I feel like that community should be everywhere. I should feel safe enough to be able to ask a neighbor for help. I should not just come home and wave to a neighbor. A lot of neighborhoods, people, you don't know your neighbors because we work so much. And then the time that we get off, we just want to rest. We really don't commune anymore. And I think that once we become more involved in our community, then we can address those needs. We don't need to wait for government. We don't need to wait for, even the, people that have the dollars. We can actually do a small thing ourselves. Like my mother, I remember before there was a coat drive, she did coat drives. She's like, who needs a coat? In my family, we didn't have that much money, but she would get everyone a coat. Cousins, neighbors. My mother did back to school backpack things before it was a thing because she believed in community. And I feel like I pass that on to my kids because they're the ones that said, let's give back. They're the ones that said, I want to help others. Because at first they wanted to give 50%. And I was like, y'all ain't gonna make no money. So then I had to talk them down to 10%. I was like, a profit. And they were able to work with that. But we also donate to other communities and other organizations. We just don't tell people about it. It's like all of us do. We give, and it's not always a show. You don't always have to tell people. It's not you don't do it to be rewarded. You do it because you feel like you want to give back.
And we were talking about this backstage, Ramonda, but you're from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street is a really large part of your founding story, why you wanted to invest in east of the river. Can you tell us, the audience, about Black Wall Street and why that played into your story?
Absolutely. So I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was just proud of being from Tulsa. But my family grew up blocks away from Black Wall Street. My parents still live there now. But it was funny, in my high school, I never heard about Black Wall Street. How many, by show of hands, have heard of Black Wall Street? Okay, Atlantic audience, love it, yes. But I never heard about this mecca of Black-owned businesses, hospitals, theaters, banks, you name it, a Black person was there owning it and running it. And the community supported each other. So this pivotal point in history, for me to not hear about it and to learn about it, blew my mind. Not until I went to Langston University, HBCU in Oklahoma, did I even hear about some of those things. And for me, it was just monumental. If I had known that we had created so many things, that we were thought leaders, that we were innovators, you think I walk tall now. I think I walk tall now. I would have walked so much more taller, so much more confidently, because I knew the lineage that I'd come from, right? And so I think that to have so many young people robbed of that information, that's just one piece of history. There's so many pockets of history that are kind of being rewritten before our eyes. And so for me, it was something that I didn't want to happen. I want to take that into my own control. My husband and I talked about how do we make Black books accessible, again, to everybody. But growing up there made me think, I don't want this to happen to somebody else. It should not. I should not rely on somebody else to teach me that, right? I want to make that a priority for us. And so it was just heart-wrenching for me when I heard about it. And so now I go back there often. My parents still live there, but it was a very seminal moment for me to know that, why would you keep that? Why would that be hidden? Why not celebrate a community that had been thriving for so many years? So yeah, it was impactful for me. And still to this day, it's a thread that guides me. It's a kind of a North Star for me when I think about that. I get emotional thinking about it because I just know what it means to know about yourself. And I know what it means when other people know about you. And there's studies that show when young people open up books that have their faces in them, that have their stories written in them, it creates self-confidence and self-esteem. Why not have that for anybody? Because a young person, y'all were young people at one point, when a young person has that in them and they grow up to be, amazing adults, confident adults, empathetic adults, why not have that? And so that comes from reading what's between the pages, right? The history that was there, our experiences that were there. So yeah, that Black Wall Street experience always is in the back of my mind. I don't want that for somebody else.
Thank you. I feel like, I've seen in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of reporting around kids in schools, especially after the pandemic, and creating that space for kids to come in and see that must be really important. Have you seen children in your community get that sort of engagement?
Absolutely. And we do programming around it. We invite children to come in, whether it's celebrating Juneteenth and drawing little Juneteenth flags or celebrating, just again, learning about history and open to all. But yeah, definitely a lot of little kids. But I think also the parents, because if they're my age, they didn't grow up with a lot of books. There's so many more books on the market that are written about Black people or about the Black experience now that was not there. So even the adults come in and feel some type of way. I'll never forget this story that my husband tells. When we first opened up our store in Anacostia, there was this gentleman. He was about 60, 70 years old, Black man. And he came and stood at the threshold of our store. And he kind of stood there and he kind of looked from left to right, just panning the whole bookstore. And all of a sudden, a tear started coming down his face. And my husband walked up and said, "Sir, is everything okay?" He said, "I've never seen this many Black books in my life." To be 60, 70 years old, to see that, like, why? So I say that because then those parents bring in younger kids. So it's a really beautiful cycle, I should say, that people really are engaged with Black books, but definitely kids. We've given out over 2,000 books to kids. We still do it. We don't talk about it all the time either. But we know how beautiful it is to have a book on the shelf that you don't have to take back. We love our libraries. Shout out to the libraries on the board, DC Public Library Foundation. But to have a book in your own home that you can read at your leisure, that you don't have to return back, is a gift, is a luxury, actually, for a lot of communities. So kids definitely is something, very deep to us to be able to create that experience for them. But we do lots of programming and lots of authors talks around kids' books, too.
I feel like I could do this forever, but I'm getting this blinking screen telling me to start Q&A. So if folks do have questions for the panelists up here, there is a mic runner back there, and you can raise your hand. But if not, I can just keep going forever. Okay, if you think about them, raise your hand, and we'll oh, right here.
Thank you. So this has been awesome to have all of you here. Thank you so much. What a blessing and a gift. But what I'd like to know is how we can advocate and support these businesses. Is it through social media, with LinkedIn? I mean, when I'm hearing your stories, and I can relate to being a mom of a 14-year-old in high school, and we try to advocate, but we don't want to take voices away. We want to bring you to the table and amplify those voices and understand how we can support you. So that's, I think, the crossroads for me, trying to understand how I can best help you, not telling your story for you, but bringing you to the table where we are so you can tell your stories. And so I'd like to know how I can get involved.
Seems like a great question for everyone. Why don't we start here and then go down?
Yeah, I mean, for our business, support looks like showing up, right? Investing your dollars into the business. We are a queer space that has a priority, so how you show up matters a lot. I think that's probably true for marginalized businesses across the board. If you're an ally, be a good one. Don't come in and take up all the space. Don't think you're like our saving grace, but come in, enjoy the atmosphere, participate, spend your dollars, tell your friends. Signal boosting on social media is great. We have an array of programming. We've had author talks, we've had karaoke, comedy shows, so there's something for everyone. So find the thing that speaks to you and hype it up. And I think getting to know our community and educating yourself, especially in this culture right now that we're in with queer and trans rights being so threatened, vote in the right direction that helps people exist safely in the world. And the best way to know how to do that is to talk to us, know us, make us part of your circles. If you have kids, they're potentially and statistically highly potentially part of our community in some form or fashion, or have really close friends that are, or may find that out in their adulthood. So like being educated on how to love on, support, and create spaces where we can exist safely, and then helping to keep those places afloat is what I would say for our establishment.
I would say ditto. And Definitely social media. I mean, that's the easiest way, you know, not the performative space. We saw a lot of that in 2020 when George Floyd was murdered. Everybody's like, oh, I bought this book from this black bookstore, picture. So, and then I'm like, where are they now in 2023? That's another conversation. What I would suggest on top of what you were saying, Rach, is, you know, a lot of businesses need grants. Go and ask, is there a grant that I can help you to get funding or to expand? Or go to speak to your local legislator, especially if you hear that, you know, they're banning books or they want to shut a bar down or a restaurant. Like, how can you can go out into those spaces, and a lot of times that accessibility is a lot easier for somebody that may look like you than it is even for me or any of us, perhaps. But I think on top of that, just going out and if there's grants, like, hey, if there's literacy issues not even in your neighborhood, but in the community at large, how can you go and write a grant for something like that? So I think that's another piece on top of social media or sharing posts or bringing your kids in a space that you may feel like it's funny when you're not the majority, how uncomfortable it can be for a lot of people. And I've heard that from a lot of our customers. But being bold enough to take your kids into a space that maybe, you know, we have black authors on the walls and we're playing, you know, hip hop music or whatever, but in those spaces so they can learn and see a whole different experience too. So that is also what you can help, because then they grow up and say, oh, you know what, I want to go back to that place and get that books that I'd never seen before. So that's what I would suggest.
For us, I would definitely agree with if you know where some money is, let us know.
Tell them, right? Tell them.
You know, our site is actually shut down until October 11th, which is our anniversary, because I need a break. I am the executive team and the marketing team, and I need a break. And actually, I have a little heart monitor on right now because I almost had a stroke, and I'm 48, literally, because we do everything ourselves. We're self-funded, and I was like, look. We need to ask people for money. And I think the tradition of strong black, you know, woman and I shouldn't ask for help because then I look weak. I had to let that go. Because I want to live.
Let it go.
So just know on October 11th the site will reopen and it'll be a big fun raising drive because we are expanding into economy price line at Walmart because we're considered premium candles. Right now they're $33 and $25. We'll also be working with HSN. We're launching a pet care line. So I get to get on HA Spoon, so we're doing that too. So we moved our manufacturing to Missouri because it just grew out of hand. We're trying to manage that, and I got tired of managing a warehouse as well. So we moved our manufacturing to Missouri. So we have a lot of big things in store. So if you see us on social media, follow us. Spread the news. On 10/11 we're reopening and we're doing fundraising, and you can also support Colin, who is the co-founder, who's 18, but he's also goes to the University of Oregon. He's a Duck. He's a defensive back. So if you want to support him, you can buy his jersey. University of Oregon. That supports us too. And also, I also have a non-binary trans child. My oldest is 23, who's not a part of the company. But I appreciate what you're doing because it was hard to find jobs. We deal with that every day, and to have spaces where where they can feel welcome and loved. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, everyone. Can we give them an applause? Thank you. Okay, well, all of these are DC businesses, so whether you're here or from out of town, you can go and drop by, but thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
For a conversation about building a brand, please welcome Melissa Benichet, founder and CEO of Baked by Melissa. Back to lead the conversation is The Atlantic's Annie Lowry.
So thanks, everybody. Because our time is short, I'm going to go ahead and get started, even though people are still sort of milling and moving around. But thank you so much for being here, and I'm so delighted to be here with Melissa to talk about Baked by Melissa. And so I was wondering if you could tell us about the origin story of your business. How did you get started doing this? And creating this business that now has 14 locations, more?
Yeah, sure. So I was 24 years old. I was an assistant media planner working at Deutsche Advertising, and I was fired from my job because I wasn't good at it or passionate about the work I was doing. But I loved to bake cupcakes, and I was baking my tie-dye cupcakes for everyone and anyone. If it was your birthday and I loved you, I baked you tie-dye cupcakes. So I went home from being fired, and, well, actually, I went from being fired right to my brother's office, my best friend. He had his first office on 38th and 8th, like just a taxi ride away from the office I was fired from. So I went right there crying, and he said, it's the best thing that ever happened to you. Go home, bake your cupcakes, we'll start a business, which wasn't crazy because we always wanted to start a business together, and we would always try and come up with business ideas. So I went home that night from being fired and baked 4 batches of cupcakes, sent them into work with my best friend's little sister, who was interning at a PR agency, and the owner of the PR agency actually loved them and put me in touch with her caterer. I did a tasting with him, and within weeks, Baked by Melissa was born.
This is amazing. I mean, so it's a very quick turnaround, right? Like within 48 hours of this kind of, was it surprised when you got fired?
Yes, I thought I was doing a good job. But in hindsight, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Yeah. At the time, my goal was to just find something that I could feel tired and fulfilled from at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And were you part of, I know you mentioned that you and your brother had these entrepreneurial ambitions, and were you part of an entrepreneurial family, or was that just sort of the two of you scheming?
I am. My grandfather founded the company that my dad runs today, and there are lots of stories about that. My brother is the definition of an entrepreneur, like a mad scientist, always coming up with new ideas and businesses. So,
So talk about going from baking cupcakes in an apartment kitchen to actually getting the business going. What was the challenge there? What was the process like, given that you're now an established food retail, chain?
Sure. So I think most people, when they think of starting Baked by Melissa, they probably think of a business plan with very clear steps along the way. I was baking out of my apartment to the point it was back-breaking work. And I'm not operationally I didn't whatever. But it was more about opportunities that presented themselves and taking advantage of them. So I had met an owner of a cafe in Soho in New York City, and he fell in love with our product, and he invited me to do my baking in his commercial kitchen in the basement on Spring and Broadway. And in return, I would sell him my cupcakes at cost, and he would open a booth in the Union Square Holiday Market, which is a 6-week period of time in New York City where, artisans, I guess, sell their products. So we did that, and that's how I moved into this commercial baking kitchen space, which was awesome because I just had to get my food handler's license. He already had everything there, and we got some equipment and things like that, but I wouldn't have known the first thing about setting up a commercial kitchen.
Can you talk to me a little bit about differentiation or familiarity with this baked good? Because I feel like cupcakes, on the one hand, you can get them in lots of places, right? It's a food stuff that's kind of common. On the other hand, it's a food that I think that people just want to feel kind of cozy with, right? Yeah. So what was the idea of, okay, how are we going to be different? How are we going to strike that nerve that we all have, I think? Who does not like cupcakes?
I do not know anyone who does not, even people who say they don't.
Yeah.
They do. I love cupcakes, and I love baked goods, and I mean the company is called Baked by Melissa. I'm just a little kid at heart that loves to get the munchies and try all these flavor combinations. So I just loved cupcakes. I started baking them, and then obviously if you're starting a business, you want a unique product that solves for something. We made them small so you could try them all. They're just a bite. They're less than 100 calories or 50 calories for nothing,
you can eat 15 of them.
It's the perfect ratio, and it's the perfect ratio of cake to stuffing to icing in every single bite, in flavors that make you feel like a kid again, made with the most delicious ingredients, still 15 years later, made entirely by hand, and it is an incredible product. So the bite-sized nature that allows you to try every flavor. We can ship our product anywhere in the United States, guaranteed fresh, the date that you choose on our website. And I think all of those different things really make our product special.
Absolutely. So I want to talk to you about two sort of big shifts in the economy that have been happening while you've been, creating this business. So the first is that, you exist in kind of part of the pandemic era here, or the recession era, right? Going back to, quite a while ago. How was it sort of operating back then, or, in the post-recession era when things felt really different? And then maybe we'll answer that, and then I want to talk to you about being in the pandemic as well.
Sure. So we were born on the heels of it was kind of coming to an end, but we offered people a $1 smile. You could go retail therapy all the way and spend hundreds of dollars on jeans and God knows what else, or you could stop at this cute little window in Soho and get 3 cupcakes for $3, and each one brings you back to a time in your life that things were so much more simple. And I think that's the magic of Baked by Melissa. You just you get happy no matter what is happening. Even if, God forbid, you lose somebody you love, which we hear a lot from our customers. Oh, I got your cupcakes after losing a loved one, and it was the first time I saw it. It's emotional. It's incredible. We bring smiles to people's faces during good times and bad. And I just think that's actually one very consistent theme since the day we started.
And how about during the pandemic, which, New York was particularly hard hit, and the shutdown was particularly extraordinary. And so talk me through, running a business through that really unusual and painful period.
Well, I also became CEO December 5th, 2019. So by accident, I didn't want to be CEO, I thought, but I'm so happy to be CEO. So shame on me for that. But I was working with somebody who I really loved and had a great partnership with, and he could no longer be our CEO, and it was effective immediately. And so my board was like, all right, Melissa will be CEO. So I was still kind of getting my wings and, earning my confidence as the leader of the company. And in many ways, obviously, I always had a high level position, but it's different when it's all on you. And we had holiday in December, Valentine's Day in February, which, at that point, people are already starting to talk about the pandemic. And we did incredible, which was good. And then COVID hit. And our, foot traffic at retail was oh my God, down 75%, I think. People aren't buying cupcakes. They're stocking up on toilet paper. So we changed. Connecting with our customer is my priority all the time, just that relationship that we have. And so I got my creative and marketing team into the conference room, and nobody's celebrating. We have to connect with her. We call her Jordan, and stock up on cupcakes. If you can't celebrate in person, send cupcakes. And we changed our message. We really talked directly to me. I'm our customer too. What do I want to hear? How can Baked by Melissa serve me and my friends? And it turned things around, and we managed to really transform our business through COVID. And I would stop at nothing because my name's on the door, and I was going to drive the FedEx truck if I had to.
And so can you talk me through, were there other times that you felt like your branding or your communication with the customer had changed, right? Because it's, on the one hand, you have this business that's doing this kind of unique thing, and I think has a lot of, as you've sort of said, a lot of emotion that comes with it, right? Cupcakes are meant to bring comfort and joy and happiness to people, and they're adorable and they're wonderful. But I'm wondering, if there were other points at which you had to sort of shift the way that you talked about it or the way it was presented to people.
I think we're always thinking about how we communicate with people and present our product a lot. We are very fortunate in the sense that we have one product, right? It's a bite-sized cupcake. And our big rock moments are the big holidays, and year after year, they're pretty much the same, but we always look at what we did the year before and think about what's happening in society today and shift accordingly. But then there are other things that happen that we try and speak to and use as an opportunity to show our customer, hey, we get it, we're here too.
So with that, we should talk about TikTok, which I always feel like whenever I talk, I feel like the oldest person alive talking about TikTok. But tell me about your company's relationship with it, because there's been some moments of virality here.
Yeah, I think viral is such a funny word.
I do too.
Like as somebody with like young kids, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when they get a virus, like, ugh, it's like, but anyway.
Yes.
Neither here nor there. So I love social media. I wish that I've always like, I love Instagram and Facebook. And I think when Instagram came out, I didn't see the opportunity for my business immediately. I was still early on, but like, I remember like it was so easy to build a community. Mm-hmm. And then once I really started to use it as a resource for the company and myself, I just made this promise to myself that, you know what, next time like a new channel of social media comes out, I'm going to learn it and I'm going to get to know it. And then TikTok happened and we were like, it wasn't a focus for anyone at Baked by Melissa. It was just like, as a growing business, there's always not enough bandwidth. So we were posting content that I really didn't believe in. And I kept like, look at this person has so many more followers. Like we're better. Like we could do that. And nobody would really listen. And then COVID hit. So I just started like getting to know TikTok. And like I make dessert every night. Like I am the epitome of Baked by Melissa, and I just love food and sweets. And so I just would start like taking videos and try and figure it out. And I created like my own personal like Melissa Benishai account, but everything like was doing really well. So I was like, all right, I'll just post it from Baked by Melissa. And I was like, I'll just post like this salad that I'm making, and because it's fun. I like scrapbooking, and it's like a virtual scrapbook. And yeah, it just started going crazy. But I think what people are responding to is like my love and passion for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not. I'm not like looking at other accounts and being like, oh, they're doing that, so I'm going to try and do that. I'm just being my authentic self. And I think that's what works on social media.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do feel like I feel like brands in general have a very tortured relationship with social media.
If you have a social media strategy, you're fucked. Like,
yeah.
Because and the bigger the company, the harder it probably is, because they need to have a strategy, but you can't. You have to let your community tell you what they like, and what they respond to is what you apply to what you continue to do.
Right, because it does seem that you're pointing to like a certain authenticity and a certain like an unpackaged, almost, it feels like it's about that community as opposed to maybe like a formal advertisement. Does that make sense?
What I'm doing on TikTok and now Instagram too is I'm just creating a community of people. Like I'm giving them what they want, and how that directly impacts my business, I can't tell you. I mean, now I can tell you, but I couldn't tell you, and I trusted it.
Yeah.
And we did lots of market research to understand like what our customer loves about our brand, and it turns out what they told us is handcrafted, variety of flavors, and Melissa is real, which I needed to hear at the time. And this is Melissa is real, and they love it. And the market research was also like, and whatever Melissa feels inside, no joke. We spent all this money, and they were like, what? Like the heart of the brand is the soul of Melissa. And so there you go. And it just gave me the confidence I needed to stomp my feet when everyone on my team was like, what? No, we can't post salad. I guess we can, like, because our priority is to build a community and deliver consistent feedback, like consistent content that, makes them come back.
Yeah. Is there a downside to the Melissa is real part of it, right? Like you have a...
Personally or professionally?
Yeah, I mean, like both, frankly, right? Like that actually feels like a lot of pressure. And I'm sure it's hard to, feed the gaping maw of the internet and, keep on going with it.
It is a privilege that I take very seriously, and I always have, even before. Like, it's crazy though. Like now, especially, even I was here with my family, like right here, like a month ago, and like we were with another family, and my friend, the other mom, was like quantifying my fame. She's like, every hour somebody comes up to me, they're like, I love your salads, like I love your recipes. And so it's just funny. Like
Do you have thoughts on the sort of like the simultaneous cupcake and salad takeoff phenomenon, right? Like it's an interesting pairing and an interesting sort of like place of growth there.
I mean, my food philosophy is that like mealtime is for nourishment and dessert is for indulging. And if you get your fulfillment from your meals, you can absolutely indulge in dessert every day, which is how I like have been living for all this time. So I think that dessert is for the sugar and the indulgence, and it's just a bite. So it makes sense. And mealtime is for eating your, vitamins and nutrients and getting. I have small kids. I'm like, they know. You need your protein. Carrots make you see great. And you need all that stuff.
So do you have advice for founders, entrepreneurs, people who are starting their own business?
It's really hard. The story makes it sound easy. It's not. It was really hard then, and it's even harder
And you're
now.
describing a long period of time.
15
right?
years.
Like a long
it's
period
our
of business building.
Birthday this month. Yeah. It either makes you or breaks you. So I guess like my advice would be small steps forward every single day. And we're the same. I'm just like you. I don't know. I'm just, I'm believing in myself. You have to believe it to achieve it. And you just have to keep moving forward. And if you don't know, that's okay. I don't know. But when I don't know, I can recognize that I don't know. And then I ask somebody that I think does know. And I have like a little, small group of people that I trust, that I surround myself with. And that's team. And, we just keep going. It's really fucking hard, though.
It is very hard. So
I just make it look easy sometimes. I'm on social media. I'm like editing, like just giving you little tiny slices of literal slices of what I'm doing, and that's the world that we live in.
Yeah, little bite-sized cupcakes. So we're going to open it up to a few audience questions. We have some microphones, and if folks have a question, if they could just wait to get the mic before they ask it, just so that everybody could hear. And if we don't have questions, then I have more questions. Okay. Friend.
Hi, thank you so much. I had a question about when you're at that level of growth and feeling like, from what you allude to, like feeling like that need to better market your company. Like, could you speak more on just what that process is like, scaling up, knowing who to even pull in to like evaluate where you take it to the next level, especially with marketing?
Sure. So with marketing, actually, we were using a digital marketing agency at one point, and we weren't seeing the results we wanted. And so we brought them in and we started asking them questions to seek to understand, and it turned out that they didn't understand, quite honestly. And when things don't make sense, there's a reason. And so we actually just looked to hire somebody, that one person, low level, who we could learn from. I needed to learn digital marketing so I could better build the team to do that function at Baked by Melissa. And I learned from the people I interviewed. Ultimately, the one low-level digital marketing person I decided to hire and start with. And slowly, we built that team. And now we do all of our marketing in-house. And I don't, no offense, but I don't believe in agencies for me for that, because the brand is me. And it's such an important part of how we connect with our customer. I just can't imagine outsourcing that to somebody else, at least for my business.
Okay. Do we have more audience questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd love you to speak a little bit about that balance of product and brand. And obviously, product always has to be the highest quality, but people sometimes are only introduced to product via brand. And so at what point in the process do they become equally important, or are they just never, and product is still always more important than brand?
Product is always more important than brand, always. And I think our product, if we don't have a good product, then we have nothing to sell. You could be doing great at marketing, but they're going to get a product that isn't good, and they're not going to have a positive experience with it, and they're not going to come back. And I think customer acquisition and lifetime value is so important to really growing a business today, especially. It's so easy for people to go back and be loyal to a brand. So creating a product that is best in class is step one, and then the brand comes second. Because like there are certain products that I buy again and again. Their brand is like, they don't have it, who cares, you know? Redmond Salt, I love Redmond Salt. It's like this small family-owned business out of Utah, and you know, they are like, how did you hear about us? Like, you know, like, what, this is crazy. And like, they don't, or like the vanilla I use, like, it's this small family-owned business and whatever, and like, people see my TikToks and like, you know, buy it, and then I get like these families that own these small businesses are like, what did you do? Like, thank you. But they don't have a brand, and it doesn't matter, you know, and now they're just trying to keep up. So product first.
So that's unfortunately all the time that we have, but I want to thank Melissa and all of you for being here for this very sweet and fun conversation about a really amazing business. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Please welcome back The Atlantic's Mega Garibaldi.
For that incredibly engaging conversation. I think I want a cupcake. Thank you to all of you for attending, and to our underwriter, Goldman Sachs. Up next on this stage is our forum on America's race to a clean energy future, so please consider staying. If you are a subscriber, thank you so very much. If you would like to pick up an Atlantic tote bag, you can do so at our subscriptions booth by the district pier. And if you would like to become a subscriber, we can help you out there as well. Thank you.